She drives people on Uber, my brother said, and I watched his fiancée's eyes fill with that particular brand of pity reserved for life's unfortunate casualties. You know, those you see everywhere. To understand how my brother could say those words at his own rehearsal dinner, surrounded by 100 guests in a room that cost more than most people's annual salary, you have to understand the 15 years that led to that moment. You have to understand how I learned to wear invisibility like a uniform. My name is Michaela Rafferty, and I've been playing a very long game. It started the summer I turned 23, fresh out of the Air Force Academy with a degree in aeronautical engineering and orders to pilot training. I came home to Boston for 2 weeks before reporting to Vance Air Force Base, and my family threw me a graduation party that felt more like a funeral. The military, my mother said to her book club friends, her voice heavy with disappointment. Can you imagine? All that potential, and she's going to spend it taking orders from men. My brother Trevor was 25 then, already working at father's investment firm, already engaged to Cassandra, a woman whose family owned half of Cape Cod. He pulled me aside that night, champagne in hand, concern etched across his face like he was about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. It's not too late, he said. Father can make some calls, get you into the firm. You'd start at the bottom, obviously, but at least you'd have a future. I have a future, Trevor. Mickey. He only called me Mickey when he was trying to be brotherly. You're gonna be what, a glorified bus driver? Flying cargo planes to nowhere? I smiled at him, the smile I'd perfected over years of being underestimated. Something like that. It's a waste, you know that, right? I didn't tell him about the T-38 Talon I'd already logged 200 hours in. I didn't mention the instructor who'd pulled me aside after my final evaluation and said I had hands that could make an aircraft dance. I didn't explain that I'd graduated second in my class, or that my orders to pilot training were the result of recommendations from 3 different generals. I just smiled and let him think he knew better. Because here's what I'd learned at the academy. Some people will never see you clearly. They'll look at you through a lens ground from their own insecurities and limitations, and no amount of evidence will ever change the prescription. So you have 2 choices. Exhaust yourself trying to make them see, or use their blindness to your advantage. I chose the latter. Over the next 15 years, I flew everything the Air Force put in front of me, C-17s first, hauling cargo across the Pacific. Then C-130s, which led to special operations missions I still can't discuss. I upgraded to KC-135 tankers, mastered mid-air refueling at 30,000 feet, and eventually landed a spot-flying VIP transport, circa -40s and C-37s carrying generals and cabinet secretaries. Every time I came home, twice a year if I was lucky, my family asked the same questions. Still in the Air Force? Still flying? When are you going to get a real job? And I gave them the same vague answers. Yeah, still doing the transportation thing. Just moving people around. The money's okay, the travel's interesting. I never lied, I just let them fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. Trevor assumed I was flying cargo, Mother assumed I was struggling, Father assumed I'd made a youthful mistake I was too proud to admit. And Cassandra seemed to take a particular pleasure in my perceived failures. Still in that little apartment in Virginia, she'd ask at family dinners, her voice dripping with concern. Trevor and I were just looking at houses in Newton. 15,000 square feet. The master closet alone is bigger than most apartments. Sounds spacious, I'd say. You should come visit sometime. We could help you with your resume. Trevor knows people everywhere. I lived on Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, not Virginia, in officer housing that was comfortable and secure and exactly what I needed. But I never corrected her. Why would I? Watching Cassandra perform her superiority was like watching a very expensive piece of theater, entertaining if you didn't take it seriously. The truth was, I was flying Boeing VC-25s by then, Air Force One when the president was aboard, SAM 28,000 and 29,000 otherwise. I was one of 12 pilots qualified to fly the most famous aircraft in the world, carrying the most powerful person on the planet. But at family gatherings, I was still Mickey the disappointment, Mickey the glorified bus driver, Mickey who'd wasted her potential on a, quote, government job. I cultivated the image carefully. I drove a 10-year-old Toyota when I came home. I wore Gap instead of designer labels. I stayed in my childhood bedroom instead of booking a hotel. I asked vague questions about Trevor's work and nodded along when Father explained investment strategies I'd been using for years. My own portfolio was managed by a private wealth advisor in DC, my retirement accounts were maxed out, I owned property in 3 states, but none of that existed in my family's version of my life. To them, I was the daughter who'd made a wrong turn and was too stubborn to ask for directions. The game had rules, and I followed them religiously. Never mention specific assignments, never name drop, never explain, never defend. And absolutely never, ever reveal the clearances, the access, or the weight of the responsibilities I carried. It wasn't about secrecy, though operational security was part of it. It was about something more fundamental, the exquisite comedy of being invisible in plain sight. I'd sit at holiday dinners listening to Trevor explain the stress of managing accounts, and I'd think about flying through an electrical storm over the Atlantic, with the Secretary of Defense aboard, riding lightning with nothing but training and nerve between success and catastrophe. I'd listen to Mother worry about my future, and I'd remember standing in the Oval Office while the president thanked me personally for getting him to a crisis negotiation in time to prevent a war. I'd watch Cassandra show off her latest acquisition, jewelry, cars, vacation homes, and I'd think about the view from 40,000 feet, watching the curvature of the earth emerge from the darkness. They thought they knew my life, they thought they understood my choices, they thought I needed their pity, their help, their intervention. And I let them think it because their assumptions were the perfect cover for a life they couldn't begin to imagine. The invitation to Trevor's rehearsal dinner arrived in April, forwarded to me in Ramstein while I was waiting out a weather delay. Trevor and Cassandra were finally getting married after a decade-long engagement that had survived recessions, career changes, and at least 2 suspected affairs on Cassandra's part. The wedding was scheduled for June at the family estate in Manchester by the Sea. 200 guests, 10-piece orchestra, flowers imported from Ecuador. The rehearsal dinner alone had a guest list that read like a Fortune 500 directory. I checked my schedule. I was flying the president to London in early June, then had a 2-week rotation in the backup pool. I could make it work if I caught a red-eye from Andrews the night before. I RSVP'd yes and went back to my pre-flight checklist. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I landed at Andrews at 11 p.m. after bringing the president back from a G7 summit in Tokyo. 16 hours in the air, 3 time zones, and the kind of diplomatic cargo that required absolute precision. I filed my post-flight reports, debriefed with the squadron commander, and drove straight to Logan Airport for a 6 a.m. commercial flight to Boston. I arrived at my parents' house in Newton at 9 a.m., exhausted and operating on coffee and military discipline. Mother opened the door in her tennis whites. "Michaela, you look exhausted." "Long flight?" "Still doing those late-night Uber shifts?" She pulled me into a hug that smelled like Chanel and concern. "Honey, there are better ways to make money. Trevor could really get you set up with something stable." I almost laughed. I had made more in the last month than Trevor made in 6. And that didn't include the housing allowance, the flight pay, or the benefits package that came with being a field-grade officer in a presidential squadron. "I'm managing, Mom." "Well, you should rest. The rehearsal dinner is at 6. Cassandra has the seating chart arranged by income bracket, and I'm afraid you're at the table with, well, the service industry people." "Perfect, I'll fit right in." She patted my cheek like I was 12. "That's the spirit. Make the best of it." Quote, I slept for 3 hours, woke to 17 messages in the squadron group chat about a scheduling conflict for next month, handled it in 10 minutes, and started getting ready for dinner. The rehearsal dinner was at the Hawthorne Hotel in Salem, a historic property that Cassandra's family had rented in its entirety for the weekend. I drove my Toyota, parked between a Bentley and a Maserati, and walked into a world that existed solely to demonstrate wealth. The ballroom was decorated in white and gold. Crystal chandeliers caught the light from 100 candles. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvre that cost more per bite than most people spent on entire meals. I grabbed a glass of champagne and found my table. Mother was right about the seating arrangement. I was at table 12, tucked in the back corner with a collection of people who worked in various service industries. A caterer, a wedding planner, a personal trainer, a woman who managed a high-end spa. They were perfectly nice people who'd been relegated to the cheap seats because they didn't have investment portfolios worth discussing. Michaela! Cassandra swept over an address that probably cost more than my car. I'm so glad you could make it. Trevor was worried you'd be working. Wouldn't miss it. We put you at table 12. I hope that's okay. We tried to seat people with others in similar situations. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. So everyone would be comfortable. Very thoughtful. How's the driving going? Still doing the Uber thing? Still transporting people, yeah. God, you're so brave. All those strangers, all those late nights. She shuddered theatrically. I could never. But it's honest work, Nothing to be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed. Of course not. And really, the economy needs people like you. Someone has to do the driving. She patted my arm and floated away to greet more important guests. I settled into my chair and surveyed the room. Trevor was holding court near the bar, surrounded by his firm's partners. Father was talking to Cassandra's father, both men in bespoke suits, both gesturing with the confidence of people who'd never doubted their place in the world. Mother was with her book club friends, probably explaining my situation with carefully calibrated concern. The wedding planner next to me leaned over. First time at one of these? These? Old money weddings, they're always like this. Everyone's sorted by net worth like produce at Whole Foods. I laughed. I grew up with this. Yeah? You don't seem like, she gestured vaguely at the room. Like what? Like them. She said it kindly. You seem normal. I'll take that as a compliment. Dinner was served, 5 courses, each paired with a different wine. I ate and made small talk and watched my family perform their roles. Trevor, the successful son. Cassandra, the perfect bride. Mother and father, the proud parents. And me, the cautionary tale, the daughter who'd chosen wrong. After the main course, Cassandra's father stood for a toast. He talked about family, about legacy, about the importance of marrying well and building a life that mattered. He talked about Trevor's success, about Cassandra's accomplishments, about the bright future ahead of them. He didn't mention me. Why would he? I was at table 12, practically invisible. Then came the moment I'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating. Cassandra's aunt, a woman named Deandra, who'd made her fortune in commercial real estate, stood and suggested they go around the room having people introduce themselves and share their professions. It's important to know who's in the room, she announced. You never know who might be a valuable connection. It started at table 1, CEOs, venture capitalists, surgeons, lawyers. Each introduction met with polite applause and knowing nods. By table 7, the crowd had grown less impressive but still respectable. Marketing directors, senior managers, a few successful entrepreneurs. Table 12 came last. The caterer went first. I run Elegant Affairs Catering. We've done events for the governor. Polite applause. The wedding planner. I'm with Premier Events Boston. We coordinate high-end weddings and corporate functions. More applause. Then it was my turn. I opened my mouth, but Trevor spoke first. That's my sister Michaela, he announced from across the room, his voice carrying that particular tone of brotherly affection mixed with apology. She drives people on Uber. Those you see everywhere. The room went quiet for a beat. Then Cassandra jumped in, her voice syrupy with sympathy. In all weather, poor thing. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not mean exactly, but the kind of laughter that comes from discomfort mixed with relief that you're not the one being pitied. I felt the other people at my table shift uncomfortably. The wedding planner actually reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. I kept my face neutral, smiled even. This was the game. This was the role I'd cultivated for 15 years. Then a woman at table 3, someone's wife I'd gathered from earlier conversations, let out a sharp laugh. Uber? She turned to look at me directly, and I saw something shift in her expression. Recognition. Uber? She flies Air Force One. My husband saw her name on the crew roster last week. The room didn't just go quiet. It went silent, the kind of silence that has weight and texture that presses against your eardrums like a change in altitude. The woman stood up, walked closer. Major Michaela Rafferty, right? My husband is Lieutenant Colonel James Boone, Deputy Director of Operations at Andrews. He came home last week, talking about the crew that flew the president to Tokyo. Said you handled some crazy weather over the Pacific like you were flying a Cherokee in clear skies. Every eye in the room was on me now. I set down my wine glass carefully. The weather wasn't that bad. He said you diverted around a typhoon that grounded every other aircraft in the region. It was a small typhoon. He said the president personally commended you after landing. I didn't respond to that. Some things were still classified. Trevor had gone pale. Air Force One? The VC-25, I said calmly, though we call it SAM 28000 when the president's not aboard. I fly both primary aircraft plus the C-32 backup. You fly, Mother's voice was faint. You fly the president? When I'm on rotation, yes. Along with 11 other pilots. It's a pretty standard assignment for senior pilots in the presidential squadron. Cassandra's mouth had fallen open. But you always said you moved people around? I do move people around, just at 45,000 feet instead of street level. You let us think, Trevor started. I let you think exactly what you wanted to think, I interrupted. I've never lied about my job, not once. I told you I was in the Air Force. I told you I flew transport. I told you I moved people. You just decided that meant cargo planes and mediocrity. Father had found his voice. Why wouldn't you tell us? I did tell you, Dad, repeatedly. For 15 years, you just didn't listen. Lieutenant Colonel Boone's wife, I still didn't know her first name, was grinning. My husband said you're being considered for squadron commander. Said you're one of the best pilots he's ever seen. That's classified, I said, but without much heat. Oops. She didn't look sorry. The wedding planner next to me was staring. You fly Air Force One. Among other things. Holy shit. Yeah. Cassandra had recovered enough to attempt damage control. Well, that's wonderful, Michaela. We just had no idea. You're always so modest. I prefer the term operationally secure. But why let us think? Because it was interesting, I said simply. Watching all of you perform your little superiority dance. Watching Trevor explain investment strategies I've been using for a decade. Watching Dad lecture me about career choices while I held security clearances he couldn't even apply for. Watching you, Cassandra, pity my lifestyle while I made more in a month than most people at this dinner make in a year. The silence had teeth now. It was like being undercover, I continued. Except, instead of infiltrating enemy territory, I was just sitting at Thanksgiving dinner listening to my own family explain my life to me. Trevor finally found words. That's fucked up, Mickey. Is it? More fucked up than announcing to a room full of strangers that your sister drives Uber? More fucked up than seating me with the service industry people like I'm an embarrassment to the family? No one had an answer for that. Lieutenant Colonel Boone's wife was still smiling. I'm Libby, by the way, and I am so sorry for outing you, but watching their faces right now is absolutely worth whatever security violation I just committed. I couldn't help it. I laughed. I'll have my commander call your husband. Please do. James will love this story. Deandra, the real estate aunt, cleared her throat. Well, this is unexpected. Major Rafferty, I apologize if we seemed dismissive. You didn't seem dismissive. You were dismissive. There's a difference. Yes. Well, she sat down abruptly. I looked at Trevor, really looked at him. I'm happy for you, I mean that. You and Cassandra are getting married, you have successful careers, you're building a life you're proud of, that's great. But, he said quietly, but maybe next time, before you explain someone else's life to a room full of people, you make sure you actually know what that life is. I stood up, picked up my champagne. I'm going to get some air, congratulations on the wedding. I walked out of the ballroom into the hotel's garden terrace. The night air was cool, carrying the smell of salt from the ocean a few miles away. I could hear the muted sounds of the string quartet through the windows. My phone buzzed. A text from Libby Boone, "You're my hero. Also, James wants to know if you can fly him home from Andrews next month. He's terrified of commercial pilots now." I smiled and typed back, "Tell him to file a request through his CO, and thank you for the excellent timing. Anytime. Your family needed that wake-up call." I stood there for a few minutes, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Sam 28,000 was probably being prepped for the next mission. Somewhere, another pilot was running through checklists, checking weather reports, preparing to carry the weight of a nation in an aluminum tube, hurtling through the stratosphere. Tomorrow, I'd fly back to Andrews. Next week, I'd be in the rotation again. Next month, I might be flying the president to negotiate a peace treaty or visit troops overseas or any of 100 other missions that would never make it into my family's understanding of my life. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, they knew. The door opened behind me. Trevor stepped out, hands in his pockets, looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen him. "I'm sorry," he said. "Which part are you sorry for?" "All of it? The Uber thing, the assumptions, the way we've treated you." He sat on the stone wall beside me. "I genuinely didn't know, Mickey. You never said." "I said plenty. You just didn't listen." "Why didn't you force us to listen?" I considered the question. "Because you wouldn't have believed me anyway. And because proving myself to you wasn't my job. My job was flying the aircraft. Everything else was just noise." "Air Force One," he said quietly. "Jesus Christ." "It's a plane, Trevor. A really big, really important plane with a lot of security protocols and some very high-stakes passengers, but still just a plane. Do you ever get scared?" "Every single flight. Fear keeps you sharp." We sat in silence for a moment. "For what it's worth," Trevor said finally, "I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. Thanks. Can we start over? Like, actually know each other instead of whatever we've been doing?" I thought about it, about the years of mockery and dismissal and condescension, about the game I'd played and the invisibility I'd worn and the satisfaction of this moment. "Maybe," I said, "but it starts with you actually wanting to know who I am. Not who you think I should be. Deal?" We shook hands like we were negotiating a treaty, which, in a way, we were. Inside, the dinner was breaking up. People were gathering their things, heading out, probably texting everyone they knew about the Uber driver, who turned out to fly Air Force One. I'd be the story of the wedding, the unexpected revelation, the sister who'd been underestimated for 15 years. I could live with that. Because here's what I'd learned in 15 years of playing the game. Being underestimated is only a weakness if you believe what they believe about you. If you know your own worth, if you're secure in your own capabilities, then their assumptions become your advantage. I'd let my family think I was small so they'd never see me coming. And when the moment finally arrived, when the truth couldn't be hidden anymore, it wasn't because I'd chosen to reveal it. It was because the universe has a sense of humor, and sometimes the best reversals are the ones you never saw coming. I flew back to Andrews the next morning. The wedding went off without a hitch the following weekend. Trevor and Cassandra got married under clear skies, and I sat in the second row instead of the back corner. Mother introduced me to everyone as my daughter, the Air Force pilot. Father asked intelligent questions about my career for the first time in 15 years. And Cassandra apologized, genuinely, for every dismissive comment she'd ever made. I accepted the apologies, answered the questions, smiled for the photos. But I didn't stop driving the Toyota, didn't start dressing in designer labels, didn't change the fundamental way I moved through the world. Because the greatest lesson I'd learned wasn't about my family finally seeing me clearly. It was about me never needing them to. 3 months later, I made squadron commander, youngest person ever appointed to the position. The president himself called to congratulate me. I texted Trevor the news. He responded immediately, "That's amazing! When can we visit Andrews and see the plane?" I smiled at my phone. File a request through official channels. I'll see what I can do. Some games are worth playing forever,